I'm Audrey Collins, 37 years old, and 6 months ago I buried my 12-year-old son Ethan after watching leukemia slowly take him from me. The grief was unbearable, but what came next shattered my world completely. My parents skipped his funeral, then had the audacity to demand his $850,000 trust fund, money his paternal grandparents had lovingly set aside for his future, so my sister Jessica could have her dream wedding. Even now, saying those words aloud makes my stomach turn. Before I share my full story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Please hit subscribe and like if stories of family betrayal and finding strength through unimaginable loss resonate with you. Growing up in Portland as the oldest daughter in what appeared to be a typical middle-class family, I always sensed something wasn't quite right. My parents, Richard and Linda Mitchell, made it clear through countless small moments that my younger sister Jessica was their favorite. Whether it was the larger birthday parties, the new clothes while I got hand-me-downs, or the way they'd showcase her B+ report cards while ignoring my straight A's, the pattern was unmistakable. I accepted this dynamic as normal until I met Michael Collins during my sophomore year at Oregon State. Michael was studying engineering and had the kindest eyes I'd ever seen. We connected instantly over our shared love of classic literature and hiking the Pacific Northwest trails. What struck me most was how attentively he listened when I spoke, something I'd rarely experienced in my family home. After 3 years of dating, we married in a small ceremony. My parents complained about the modest venue and how Jessica wasn't given a more prominent role as bridesmaid. Meanwhile, Michael's parents, Eleanor and Robert Collins, embraced me completely. They were wealthy from Robert's successful medical practice but remained humble and generous. They treated me like the daughter they never had. Our early marriage was blissful but challenging. We both finished college, found decent jobs, Michael as an engineer and myself as an elementary school teacher, and bought a small starter home in the suburbs. When we decided to start a family, we faced unexpected hurdles. Month after month of disappointment led to fertility treatments that stretched our finances and emotional reserves. After 3 heartbreaking years of trying, we finally received the news we'd been praying for. I'll never forget Michael's face when I showed him the positive pregnancy test, pure joy and wonder. Those 9 months were magical. Michael attended every appointment, painted the nursery a soft green, we wanted the gender to be a surprise, and read parenting books cover to cover. When Ethan Michael Collins arrived after 18 hours of labor, I understood what unconditional love truly meant. He had Michael's thoughtful eyes and my auburn hair. When Michael placed him in Eleanor and Robert's arms at the hospital, they wept openly. A week later, they surprised us by establishing a trust fund for Ethan's education and future. Initially funded with $250,000, they continued to add to it annually, eventually growing it to $850,000 by the time Ethan was 10. Every child deserves a secure future, Robert had said. We want our grandson to chase his dreams without financial burden. My parents, in contrast, sent a store-bought card that arrived 3 weeks late. The early years with Ethan were everything I'd hoped for in motherhood. He was a curious, gentle child who loved dinosaurs and building elaborate Lego structures. By 5, he was reading chapter books and asking profound questions about how the world worked. Michael would take him fishing on weekends, while I taught him to bake my grandmother's recipes. Ethan was equally comfortable discussing space exploration with Michael as he was helping me grade papers for my 3rd grade class. Our family unit was unshakable, until it wasn't. When Ethan was 7, Michael died instantly in a highway collision with a drunk driver. The call from the police came at 3:17 p.m. on a Tuesday. I remember collapsing against the kitchen counter, wondering how I would tell our son his father was never coming home. Ethan and I grieved together. We established new rituals, Sunday morning pancakes shaped like dinosaurs, a memory box where we placed notes to Michael on difficult days, stargazing on clear nights because Michael had loved teaching Ethan about constellations. Eleanor and Robert remained constants in our lives, visiting monthly despite living in California, sending care packages, and always ensuring we felt supported. My parents sent another card. Jessica didn't acknowledge the loss at all. Through it all, the trust fund provided a sense of security. Though we didn't need to touch the principal, my teaching salary and Michael's life insurance covered our needs. Knowing it was there gave me peace. Michael and I had always agreed that education would be Ethan's pathway to any future he desired. Now that Michael was gone, the trust represented his love extending forward through time, protecting our son's opportunities. "Dad's still taking care of us," Ethan said once, wise beyond his years. "Even though we can't see him. We established a new normal. We survived. We even found moments of joy again." I never imagined we would face something even more devastating than losing Michael. The first signs were subtle enough that I initially dismissed them. Ethan seemed more tired than usual after soccer practice. His coach mentioned he wasn't running with his usual energy. Then came the bruises, on his shins, arms, appearing without explanation. When a persistent low-grade fever lasted for 2 weeks despite antibiotics from our family doctor, an alarm bell rang in my mind that wouldn't quiet. The pediatrician ordered blood tests just to rule things out. His careful expression when he called me back the next day told me everything before he spoke a word. More tests followed, then a referral to Oregon Health Sciences University Children's Hospital, and finally the devastating confirmation: acute lymphoblastic leukemia. I sat in a sterile consultation room, holding Ethan's hand as Dr. Melissa Winters explained treatment protocols, survival rates, and side effects with compassionate directness. Ethan, 10 years old and terrified, squeezed my hand so tightly my fingers went numb. But he asked intelligent questions that made the oncologist raise her eyebrows with respect. "I'm going to fight this, Mom," he whispered when the doctor stepped out. "Like Dad would." I immediately took extended leave from my teaching position. My principal and colleagues rallied around us, organizing meal deliveries and classroom coverage. Eleanor and Robert flew up from California the day after diagnosis and rented an apartment near the hospital for the first month of Ethan's treatment. My parents initially responded with appropriate shock and promises of support. "We'll be there for anything you need," my mother said during our brief phone call. But their actions never matched their words. The first round of chemotherapy was brutal. Ethan's thick auburn hair, so like mine, fell out in clumps on his hospital pillow. He endured nausea, mouth sores, and bone pain with stoicism that broke my heart. I slept on the pull-out chair beside his bed every night, learning to interpret each beep from the monitors, developing a sixth sense for when he needed a basin or pain medication before he could even verbalize it. My parents visited twice during that first month. Each time, they stayed less than an hour, visibly uncomfortable with the medical equipment and Ethan's changed appearance. My mother kept asking when he would get back to normal, missing the point entirely that our normal was gone forever. "Grandma and Grandpa Mitchell don't like hospitals," Ethan observed after they left early for the third time, claiming a dinner reservation they couldn't miss. "They're doing their best, sweetheart," I lied, protecting him from their inadequacy. Jessica never visited at all. She was too busy with her job at a boutique clothing store, then getting over a cold, she couldn't risk bringing germs to a cancer patient, then swamped with planning a charity event. Her excuses grew more elaborate as Ethan's treatment progressed. The contrast with Eleanor and Robert couldn't have been starker. Despite being in their 70s, they alternated months staying in Portland. Robert, a retired physician, studied Ethan's medical reports and asked informed questions during doctor rounds. Eleanor learned to administer Ethan's at-home medications when we had brief hospital reprieves. They never flinched at his thinness, his pallor, the central line protruding from his chest. They saw their grandson, not his illness. As winter turned to spring, we experienced the emotional roller coaster of remission followed by relapse. Each time the cancer retreated, hope would bloom, only to be crushed when blood tests revealed the leukemia cells were multiplying again. Through it all, Ethan maintained his gentle spirit and curiosity about the world. He befriended younger cancer patients on the pediatric floor, letting them play with the tablet Eleanor and Robert had given him. He named the 4-pole Ferdinand and decorated it with stickers from his nurses. The financial strain mounted despite having good insurance. Co-pays, specialized medications, gas for constant hospital trips, And household expenses while I remained on unpaid leave created constant pressure. Eleanor and Robert insisted on helping, but I was reluctant to take more from them beyond what they'd already established for Ethan. The trust fund interest can cover these expenses, Robert said pragmatically. That's why we set it up, for Ethan's needs. This qualifies. I relented, allowing small withdrawals from the interest, preserving the principal for the future we still desperately believed Ethan would have. By the time autumn leaves were falling again, Ethan had endured 2 bone marrow transplants, countless chemotherapy rounds, radiation, and experimental treatments. My once energetic son now used a wheelchair for all but the shortest distances. His body was battling not just cancer but the cumulative effects of treatments designed to save him. The pediatric oncology team called a meeting in November. Dr. Winter sat across from me, her kind face grave. Next to her, the palliative care specialist I'd been avoiding meeting. The cancer isn't responding, Audrey, she said gently. We're out of curative options. The words echoed in my head like they were coming through water. Next to me, Eleanor gripped my hand. Robert had his arm around Ethan, who sat straight-backed and solemn. How long? I managed to ask. Weeks, possibly a few months with palliative support. That night, after Ethan had finally fallen asleep with the help of medication, I called my parents. My father answered, the sounds of a dinner party in the background. Dad, the doctors say Ethan is terminal, I said, the words burning my throat. Oh, that's terrible news, he replied, his voice dropping. Then, muffled but audible, Linda, it's Audrey. The boy's not going to make it. The casual way he relayed my son's death sentence to my mother while covering the phone receiver incompletely was the moment something hardened inside me. They were spectators to our tragedy, not participants in our grief. We'll call you tomorrow, he said. They never did. As December arrived, we transitioned to home hospice care. The hospital bed in our living room faced the picture window that overlooked the backyard bird feeders Ethan had always enjoyed watching. The hospice team was remarkable, gentle, respectful, and honest with both of us about what to expect. Ethan, my beautiful boy, approached dying with the same thoughtfulness he'd shown in living. One evening as I adjusted his pain medication, he asked the question I'd been dreading. Mom, are you going to be okay when I'm gone? Like when Dad died? I wanted to lie, to protect him from my fear of life without him, but he deserved my honesty. It will be much harder, sweetheart. But eventually, I'll find a way to keep living. I'll have to, because I'll be carrying you and Dad in my heart. He nodded, satisfied. Good. Because I need you to do some things for me. Over the next few days, between periods of sleep and pain, Ethan outlined his wishes. He wanted his Lego collections donated to the children's hospital playroom. His books should go to my classroom for my students. And most importantly, he wanted part of his trust fund to purchase new gaming systems and equipment for the cancer ward where he'd spent so much time. Those kids need better stuff to do during chemo, he said practically. The old systems are always breaking down. I promised him everything, marveling at his generosity even as his body failed him. We created a small bucket list of achievable activities. We had an indoor camping night complete with s'mores made in the microwave and constellation projections on the ceiling. Eleanor and Robert helped us host a movie marathon weekend featuring all his favorite films. His favorite teacher brought his classmates cards and led a science experiment from his bedside that made him laugh for the first time in weeks. My parents sent a gift basket from a corporate service, the generic card signed Grandma and Grandpa Mitchell. Jessica texted once asking if there was anything she could do, but never followed up when I suggested simply calling to speak with Ethan. The night before Ethan died was unusually peaceful. His pain finally properly managed, he ate a few bites of vanilla ice cream, his favorite, and asked me to read from our dog-eared copy of The Hobbit, which had been Michael's favorite childhood book. Mom, he whispered as I tucked the blanket around his thin shoulders, I'm not scared anymore. You're the bravest person I've ever known, I told him truthfully. Braver than Dad? Just as brave as him. He would be so proud of you, Ethan. He smiled, his eyes closing. I think I'll see him soon. I'll tell him you're doing okay. Ethan slipped away in the early hours of morning, my hand in his, Eleanor and Robert keeping vigil with me. One moment he was there, his labored breathing filling the room, and the next, peace. Completion. My son was gone. The next days passed in a blur of unbearable tasks. The funeral home. The cemetery plot selection. Writing an obituary for a life that had barely begun. Through it all, Eleanor and Robert remained my anchors, handling details when I couldn't function, giving me space to collapse when needed. I called my parents immediately after Ethan passed. My mother answered, sounding groggy. He's gone, Mom, I said. Oh, Audrey. I'm so sorry. A pause. The service will be later this week, I assume? Yes. Thursday at 2 p.m. Cedar Hill Cemetery. There's a small reception after at our house. We'll try our best to be there, she said, without conviction. I called 3 more times that week to confirm details. Each time, they assured me they were making arrangements to attend. I desperately wanted to believe them, to have my family's support for this unbearable goodbye. Thursday morning dawned clear and cold. I stood in Ethan's room, touching his favorite sweatshirt, trying to find strength for the day ahead. My phone pinged with a text message. From my mother. Audrey, I'm sorry but we won't make it today. Jessica's boyfriend Ryan proposed last night. We're celebrating with them at brunch. I know you understand how important this is. We'll visit soon to pay our respects. I read the message 3 times, disbelief turning to a cold, clear rage. My son's funeral was less important than an engagement celebration that could have been postponed by 1 day. I didn't respond. What could I possibly say? The funeral service was small but beautiful. Ethan's teachers, several hospital staff who had grown to love him, my school colleagues, and a handful of his friends attended. Eleanor and Robert sat beside me in the front row, their grief as profound as mine. The empty seats where my parents and sister should have been felt like a physical accusation. Dr. Winters spoke eloquently about Ethan's courage. His science teacher described his brilliant mind and kind heart. I somehow found the strength to share memories of my son's 12 years, his laugh, his compassion, his resilience in the face of suffering beyond what most adults ever endure. Throughout the service, I kept glancing at the door, irrationally hoping my parents would appear. They never did. At the graveside, as they lowered the small casket adorned with white lilies, Ethan's favorite flower, Robert gripped my hand. We're your family, Audrey, he said firmly. Now and always. I nodded through my tears, grateful beyond words for these 2 people who understood what family truly meant. Back at the house, as the few attendees shared memories of Ethan over coffee and sandwiches, Eleanor overheard me explaining my parents' absence to a concerned colleague. That's unforgivable, she said, uncharacteristic anger flashing in her eyes. Absolutely unforgivable. I had no energy to defend them. For the first time, I fully admitted to myself what I'd always known: my birth family had never truly been there for me, and now they had failed my son in the most fundamental way possible. That night, after everyone had gone and the house echoed with silence, I curled up in Ethan's bed, clutching his favorite stuffed triceratops. Grief crashed over me in waves that felt like they would physically tear me apart. I had lost Michael. I had lost Ethan. And now I had to face the reality that I'd never truly had my parents' love either. January passed in a fog of grief so thick I could barely function. The simplest tasks, showering, eating, opening mail, required monumental effort. I extended my bereavement leave from school, unable to imagine facing classrooms of healthy, vibrant children while the absence of my own son consumed me. My small house felt simultaneously too empty and too full of memories. I would find myself standing in Ethan's doorway for hours, or holding his toothbrush, or opening his dresser drawers just to smell the lingering scent of him. Grief counselors call this keeping vigil, this seemingly irrational need to maintain connection through objects. I didn't care what it was called. It was all I had left. My parents called once, 2 weeks after the funeral. The conversation lasted less than 5 minutes. "Are you doing any better?" my mother asked. "No," I answered truthfully. "I'm not." "Well, these things take time," she replied awkwardly. "But you need to think about getting back to normal soon. It's not healthy to dwell." My son had been dead for 17 days. The suggestion that I was dwelling ended the call quickly. Meanwhile, Jessica's engagement announcement appeared on social media, a professional photo shoot featuring her enormous diamond ring. The caption gushed about her perfect fiancé Ryan, their plans for an extravagant destination wedding, and how they were living their best life. Not a single acknowledgement of her nephew's death 3 weeks earlier. I deleted all social media apps from my phone that day. By mid-February, practical matters demanded attention. I met with Thomas Burke, the attorney who managed Ethan's trust fund. Eleanor and Robert insisted on accompanying me, offering to drive and sit in the waiting room, but I asked them to join the meeting. They were as invested in honoring Ethan's wishes as I was. "First, let me express my condolences," Thomas said solemnly. "I met Ethan several times during trust reviews, and he was a remarkable young man." "Thank you," I managed. "He was." Thomas explained the trust's current status and the options moving forward. As Ethan's sole parent and the named trustee, I had legal authority to distribute the funds according to the trust's terms, which included provisions for Ethan's death before reaching adulthood. "The language is quite clear," he explained. "In the event of Ethan's passing as a minor, the trustee, you, Audrey, may use the funds for final expenses and then distribute the remainder at your discretion, including for your own needs and future security." "Ethan had specific wishes," I said, explaining his desire to donate to the Children's Hospital Cancer Ward. Thomas nodded. "That's absolutely within your authority. You can direct any portion of the funds to charitable causes Ethan would have supported." We discussed the tax implications and timeframe for making decisions. Thomas emphasized I didn't need to rush any distributions. "Take time to heal, Audrey. The funds are securely invested. Make these decisions when you're ready." As February turned to March, I noticed an odd pattern emerging. My parents, who had barely communicated since the funeral, suddenly began calling regularly. My mother invited me for dinner repeatedly. My father left voicemails asking about how things were going with Ethan's affairs. Their sudden interest felt jarring and inconsistent with their previous absence. Then Jessica called, the first direct contact since before Ethan's diagnosis. "Audrey. It's been too long," she gushed as if we were friends who'd simply lost touch, not family members divided by her complete abandonment during my son's illness and death. "What do you need, Jessica?" I asked bluntly. "Can't a sister just call to check in?" "Actually, I'd love to get together. I have all these wedding magazines and could use your opinion on some things." The disconnect was so profound I nearly laughed. "I'm still grieving my son, Jessica. Wedding magazines aren't exactly on my priority list." "Oh, I know," she backpedaled quickly. "But maybe it would be good for you to focus on something happy? Ryan and I are thinking of a ceremony in Maui. Very exclusive." I ended the call with vague excuses, but a suspicion had taken root. Their renewed interest coincided perfectly with the timing of my meeting with the trust attorney, a meeting my mother had specifically asked about during one of her calls. A week later, Jessica showed up unannounced at my door, arms laden with bridal magazines, fabric swatches, and a bottle of champagne. "Surprise! Sister planning day," she announced, brushing past me into the house she hadn't visited once during Ethan's illness. I stood frozen as she spread materials across my dining table, the same table where Ethan and I had done his homework, played board games, shared meals throughout his treatment. "We're thinking of having at least 8 bridesmaids," she chattered, oblivious to my stunned silence. "And you'll be one of them, of course. The resort in Maui is absolutely stunning. 5-star everything. As she flipped through reception venue photos, I noticed the price list visible on one page. The figures were staggering, easily into six figures for the package she was describing. "This seems very elaborate," I said carefully. "How are you planning to afford this?" Jessica waved dismissively. "Oh, don't worry about that. Mom and Dad are helping, and Ryan's family will contribute. It's all coming together." But her eyes slid away from mine when she said it, confirming my growing suspicion. Something wasn't right. The invitation arrived by text on a Thursday evening in late March. My mother wrote, "Family dinner this Saturday at 6 p.m. Important matters to discuss. Please come, Audrey. We miss you." After nearly a week of consideration and against my better judgment, I accepted. Perhaps it was time to rebuild some kind of relationship with my parents, however limited. Grief had left me vulnerable and longing for family connection, even from the people who had consistently disappointed me. I selected a simple black dress, still in mourning, and drove the familiar route to my parents' suburban home. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed Jessica's car and another I assumed belonged to her fiancé Ryan. A family meeting, then. My mother greeted me with an awkward hug that I barely returned. Inside, my father offered a stiff nod from his recliner. Jessica and Ryan sat on the couch, wedding magazines spread between them. Ryan was as Jessica had described, conventionally handsome, expensively dressed, with the confident demeanor of someone from significant wealth. "Audrey, this is Ryan Blackwell," Jessica gushed. "Ryan, my sister Audrey." "Condolences about your son," Ryan said with practiced sympathy that didn't reach his eyes. "Jessica's told me what a difficult time this has been." I doubted that very much, given Jessica's complete absence during Ethan's illness, but I nodded politely. Dinner was a strange affair. My mother had prepared an elaborate meal, far more extensive than our usual family dinners. The conversation remained superficial: neighborhood gossip, Ryan's job at his father's investment firm, the mild spring weather. Not once did anyone mention Ethan by name. Jessica dominated the conversation with wedding plans. The ceremony in Maui. The reception at an exclusive resort. The designer dress she'd selected. The custom-made rings. The honeymoon tour of European capitals. With each detail, the projected cost in my mind climbed ever higher. My father kept refilling my wine glass, unusually attentive. My mother urged second helpings with nervous energy. The performative normalcy was suffocating. After dessert, my father cleared his throat. "Let's move to the living room. We have some financial matters to discuss." There it was. The real purpose of this gathering. We settled in the formal living room rarely used during my childhood. My father took the lead, his posture businesslike. "Audrey, we've been thinking about Ethan's college fund," he began. "It's a trust fund, not a college fund," I corrected quietly. "Established by Michael's parents." He waved away the distinction. "Yes, that. The point is, it was money set aside for Ethan's future. And now," he paused, searching for delicate phrasing, "now that circumstances have changed, we need to discuss its purpose." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "Its purpose hasn't changed. It was for Ethan. And now it will honor his memory and wishes." My mother leaned forward. "But sweetheart, Ethan is gone." She finally said it, but only in service of whatever they were building toward. "That money just sitting there doesn't help anyone. Actually, part of it will go to the children's cancer ward, as Ethan requested before he died," I said firmly. "He wanted to help other kids going through what he experienced." My father frowned. "That's a nice gesture, but it's not practical. There are immediate family needs to consider." Jessica jumped in, her voice honeyed. "What Dad's trying to say is that family supports family. That money could do real good right now, for people who are still here." "What exactly are you suggesting?" I asked, though I already knew. My father straightened, as if preparing to close a business deal. "We think the sensible approach would be to use those funds for Jessica's wedding. It's a significant family event, a new beginning. Ethan would have wanted his family to be happy. The audacity of telling me what my dead son would have wanted struck me physically, like a slap. The wedding we're planning is quite special, Ryan added smoothly. A once-in-a-lifetime celebration of our families joining together. How much are you asking for? I managed to keep my voice steady. Jessica and my parents exchanged glances. Well, my mother said carefully, the full amount would cover everything beautifully. The venue in Maui requires substantial deposits, and with $850,000, we could secure everything without compromise. They wanted all of it. Every penny of Ethan's trust. For a wedding. We've already put down some preliminary deposits, my father added. Refundable, of course, but the best venues and vendors require early commitment. The realization hit me then, they had been planning this request while skipping Ethan's funeral. While I was selecting a casket, they were researching destination wedding venues, calculating how my son's death could finance my sister's special day. Let me understand, I said, my voice now dangerously calm. You want me to take the entire trust fund that Michael's parents established for their only grandchild, money they're still grieving the purpose of, and give it to Jessica for a wedding? After you couldn't even attend Ethan's funeral because you were celebrating her engagement? Now, Audrey, my father's tone turned stern, that's not fair. We had a prior commitment that couldn't be changed. A brunch, I stated flatly. You missed your grandson's funeral for brunch. It wasn't just brunch, Jessica protested. It was my engagement celebration with Ryan's entire family. Everyone had flown in. We couldn't reschedule because of, she faltered. Because of what, Jessica? Say it. My voice rose despite my efforts to control it. Because of Ethan's inconveniently timed death? An uncomfortable silence fell across the room. I think what everyone is trying to say, Ryan interjected smoothly, is that life has to go on. The money was intended for a future that unfortunately can't happen now. Why not use it to secure Jessica and my future instead? Something in his entitled assumption broke the last thread of my restraint. No, I said, standing up. Not $1 of Ethan's trust will pay for your wedding. That money represents Michael's parents' love for their grandson. It will go exactly where Ethan wanted it, to help children suffering as he suffered, and to secure my future as I rebuild my life without my child and husband. My mother's face hardened. You're being selfish, Audrey. You always were the difficult one. Difficult? I laughed incredulously. My 12-year-old son just died after battling cancer for 2 years. A child you barely visited, whose funeral you skipped. And I'm difficult because I won't hand over his trust fund for Jessica's destination wedding? You don't need all that money, Jessica snapped, dropping her facade of sisterly concern. You live in that small house, drive that old car. What would you even do with it? My wedding is important. More important than your nephew's life? His memory? Because that's what you're saying, Jessica. My father stood, his face flushed with anger. Now listen here, Audrey. We're your parents. We know what's best for this family as a whole. That money shouldn't go to waste. Waste? The word hung in the air between us. Is honoring my son's dying wish a waste? You know what I mean, he backpedaled unconvincingly. I know exactly what you mean. I gathered my purse and keys. This conversation is over. Do not contact me about this again. As I reached the door, my mother called after me. Audrey, you're making a mistake. Think about what we've done for you all these years. I turned back one last time. I am thinking about exactly what you've done. All these years. And especially these last 2. I walked out, closing the door firmly behind me. The sound like a period at the end of a chapter 1 was finally ready to conclude. The days following that disastrous dinner were a barrage of harassment. My parents called incessantly, leaving voicemails that oscillated between guilt-inducing pleas and thinly veiled threats. Jessica sent a stream of increasingly hostile texts, calling me selfish, bitter, and accusing me of ruining her special time out of jealousy. I silenced my phone and focused on breathing through the panic attacks that had begun to overwhelm me at random intervals. The confrontation had ripped open grief wounds that had barely begun to form the most fragile scabs. I found myself gasping for air in the grocery store, in my car, waking from fitful sleep with my heart racing. After a particularly vicious email from my father implied that Michael would be disappointed in me, I made a decision. I needed distance and perspective from people who truly understood family loyalty. I booked a flight to California to visit Eleanor and Robert. They insisted I stay in their guest room rather than a hotel, and the moment I saw them waiting at the airport, Eleanor with her arms already outstretched, something broke inside me. I collapsed into their embrace in the middle of the terminal, sobbing like the child I'd never been allowed to be in my parents' house. At their peaceful home overlooking the Pacific, I finally told them everything: my parents' lifelong emotional neglect, their absence during Ethan's illness, missing the funeral, and now the grotesque demand for his trust fund. I'd always protected them from the full truth about my family dynamics, but I couldn't carry the burden alone anymore. Robert listened with the careful attention that had made him an excellent physician, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Eleanor held my hand, her expression shifting between shock, outrage, and profound sadness. "We always wondered," she admitted when I finished. "Michael mentioned concerns about your parents' behavior several times. He said they seemed threatened by how much Ethan adored us." "Michael saw it too?" "Of course he did," Robert said gently. "He loved you too much not to notice your pain. He just didn't want to pressure you about your relationship with them. They've shown you who they are for a lifetime," Eleanor added. "The question is, what do you want to do now?" That question hung in the air as we spent the next few days walking the beach, looking through photo albums of Michael and Ethan, and discussing options for honoring Ethan's memory. Their home felt like a healing retreat, the first place since Ethan's death where I could breathe without the crushing weight of others' expectations. On the third morning, over coffee on their deck overlooking the ocean, I made my decision. I want to donate $250,000 to the Children's Cancer Ward, specifically for gaming equipment, entertainment systems, and technology to help kids through treatment. That was Ethan's wish. Eleanor nodded encouragingly. And I want to establish a scholarship in Ethan's name at his school. For students interested in science and engineering, the path he might have taken. Michael would be so proud of that, Robert said, his voice rough with emotion. The remainder I'll keep invested for now. Eventually, I might use some to go back to school, maybe for counseling certification. I think I'd like to work with families going through pediatric cancer someday. That sounds like a perfect tribute to Ethan. Eleanor reached for my hand. And what about your parents and sister? I took a deep breath. I'm going to establish boundaries. Clear, firm boundaries. They've shown me repeatedly that they don't have my best interests at heart. I can't keep hoping they'll suddenly become the family I needed. The relief that flooded through me as I said those words confirmed it was the right decision. I returned to Portland with renewed clarity and purpose. I immediately contacted Thomas Burke to begin implementing my plans for Ethan's trust. Within days, the donation to the Children's Hospital was in process, and we had drafted terms for the Ethan Collins Memorial Scholarship. The response from my parents was swift and ugly. A certified letter arrived from an attorney they had retained, threatening legal action to contest my control of the trust as Ethan's trustee, making vague allegations about my mental state following his death. Thomas Burke assured me their case had no legal merit. The trust document is ironclad, Audrey. Robert and Eleanor created it with one of the best estate attorneys in California. Your position as trustee is secure, and your decisions align perfectly with both the letter and spirit of the trust. Nevertheless, the threat of legal action from my own parents felt like the final betrayal. I made the painful decision to cut contact completely. I changed my phone number, blocked their emails, and instructed Thomas to handle any further communication through proper legal channels. The escalation continued. My parents showed up at my school, causing such a scene in the front office that the principal had to intervene. They began spreading stories to extended family members about how I was unstable and punishing them in my grief. Jessica created social media posts vaguely referencing a family member who was denying her happiness out of bitterness and envy. The cruelty reached its peak when I discovered they had visited Ethan's grave without my knowledge and left a large floral arrangement with a card that read, "We know you would have wanted to help your Aunt Jessica have her special day. We miss you." The cemetery staff, who knew me well from my daily visits, removed it immediately and called to alert me. That night was my lowest point. Curled on my bathroom floor, panic and grief overwhelming me, I questioned everything. Was I being unreasonable? Was I allowing grief to cloud my judgment? Was I dishonoring Ethan by creating this family rift? In desperation, I called Dr. Winters, Ethan's oncologist, who had given me her personal number for the hard days ahead. "Audrey," she said firmly after listening to my tearful explanation, "what you're describing is not normal family conflict. It's emotional abuse during the most vulnerable period of your life." She connected me with a grief counselor who specialized in complicated family dynamics, and for the first time, I began to understand the dysfunctional patterns that had shaped my entire life. I also found a support group for parents who had lost children to cancer. Sitting in a circle with others who truly understood the depth of my loss provided validation I hadn't realized I desperately needed. These strangers showed more genuine compassion than my biological family ever had. "My sister said I should be over it after 6 months," shared one mother who had lost her daughter 3 years earlier. "My father-in-law asked what we were going to do with all her stuff while we were still in the hospital with her body," another father said quietly. Their stories helped me realize I wasn't alone in facing callousness during grief. The difference was that most of them had other family members who provided support, while my entire birth family had failed me. But I wasn't entirely without family. Eleanor and Robert called daily. My colleagues created a protective circle around me at school. Even parents of Ethan's friends checked in regularly, bringing meals and offering practical help. Slowly, I began to rebuild. I returned to teaching part-time. I started volunteering one evening a week in the children's hospital playroom. I joined a weekend hiking group, finding solace in the forests Ethan and I had loved exploring. And with each small step forward, the desperate need for my parents' approval and love diminished. I was creating a life they had no place in, and finding strength I never knew I possessed. 6 months after that fateful dinner at my parents' house, I stood in the newly renovated playroom of the children's cancer ward at Oregon Health Sciences University Hospital. A plaque on the wall read, "The Ethan Collins Technology Center, where courage meets play." Around the room, children in various stages of treatment engaged with new gaming systems, tablets, virtual reality headsets, and interactive learning stations, all funded by Ethan's trust. Dr. Winters stood beside me, watching a young boy with a central line identical to Ethan's beat his father at a racing game, both of them laughing. "This room has transformed our patients' experience," she said quietly. "When treatment days stretch for hours, having this escape makes all the difference." Ethan understood that in a way most adults never could. Eleanor and Robert had flown in for the dedication ceremony. Robert, looking friendlier than I remembered but his eyes bright with purpose, had given a short speech about his grandson's compassion and vision. Several hospital staff who had cared for Ethan shared stories of his kindness toward younger patients, his jokes with the nursing staff, his unfailing politeness even on his worst days. That same week, Ethan's school announced the first recipient of the Ethan Collins Memorial Scholarship, a bright young girl from a single-parent household who dreamed of becoming an aerospace engineer. The scholarship would cover her undergraduate education completely, removing the financial barriers to her dreams just as Ethan's grandparents had intended to do for him. These concrete manifestations of Ethan's legacy provided an anchor for my grief, which still surged unpredictably but no longer threatened to drown me completely. My professional life had begun evolving too. I returned to teaching full-time but had also enrolled in evening counseling courses at Portland State University. The trust funds provided the security to pursue this additional education without financial stress. My principal had already expressed interest in creating a specialized position for me supporting students and families experiencing serious illness or loss once I completed my certification. With Eleanor and Robert's blessing, I sold the house filled with painful memories and purchased a small cottage closer to my school. The garden became my therapy, planting a Japanese maple tree for Ethan, cultivating the lilies he had loved, creating a small pond with water lilies and goldfish that attracted birds and butterflies. On difficult days, I would sit on the garden bench Robert had crafted and feel a peace that eluded me elsewhere. 9 months after my confrontation with my parents, I received an unexpected email from Ryan, Jessica's fiancé. The wedding had been called off. The brief message stated that after learning some truths about Jessica and her family, he had ended the relationship and wanted me to know he regretted his role in trying to claim Ethan's trust fund. I felt no satisfaction in their relationship's failure, only sadness for the poisonous values that had corrupted my sister and parents. The extravagant wedding they had been willing to destroy our relationship for would never happen. 2 weeks later, my father called from an unfamiliar number. His business had suffered financial setbacks, he explained without preamble. They needed help with mortgage payments. Jessica had moved back home after Ryan left and wasn't contributing financially. Could I loan them some money? The irony was almost too perfect. I listened silently, then responded with calm clarity, I forgive you for missing Ethan's funeral. I forgive you for trying to take his trust fund. But forgiveness doesn't mean restoration of relationship or financial support. I wish you well, but we don't have that kind of relationship anymore. After hanging up, I waited for the familiar guilt to descend, the lifetime of conditioning that made me responsible for my parents' happiness and well-being. Surprisingly, it never came. In its place was a quiet certainty that I had made the right decision for my own healing. Through grief support groups and therapy, I'd connected with a network of people who understood loss in a way few can. Among them was Daniel, a science teacher who had lost his daughter to the same type of leukemia that took Ethan 3 years earlier. Our friendship developed slowly, built on shared understanding and genuine kindness. The first time I laughed at one of his self-deprecating jokes about the terrible coffee at our support group, I felt a startling absence of guilt, as if Ethan himself had granted permission for moments of joy to exist alongside grief. Eleanor and Robert embraced this gradual healing, visiting regularly and including me in their holiday plans. You're our daughter now, Eleanor said simply. Family is about who shows up, not just DNA. That truth became my guiding principle. Family wasn't defined by obligation or biology, but by love expressed through consistent presence, especially in the hardest moments. The journey of grief changed shape over time but never ended. I still spoke to Ethan's photos, still marked his birthday and death day with special rituals, still felt phantom pains where his hand should be in mine. But alongside the grief grew purpose, connection, and even moments of unexpected joy. The lesson I carry forward is that while death takes away, love remains. Ethan's brief life transformed countless others through his direct impact and the ripples of his legacy. Michael's parents demonstrated that true family transcends even death. And perhaps most surprisingly, my birth family's betrayal taught me my own strength and the power of choosing integrity over appeasement. If you're facing family betrayal during grief, know that you're not alone. Trust your instincts about what honors your loved one's memory. Set boundaries that protect your healing. Find the people who show up, they are your true family. Every day, I carry Ethan with me, not as a burden of grief, but as a privilege of love. His trust fund didn't just secure financial stability, it revealed who could be trusted with the most precious aspects of life, loyalty, compassion, and showing up when it matters most. Have you ever had to make difficult decisions about boundaries with family during grief? What helped you find your way through? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more stories of finding strength through unimaginable challenges. Thank you for witnessing my journey. Ethan would be grateful, as am I, that his story continues to matter.